Hi there, welcome back to Scribbles and Ink Stains. My name is Mary, and today I'm going to set up a system to gain control of my 39 odd samples and full bottles of fountain pen ink. I'll be swatching 10 different blue inks by 4 different ink makers, and timestamps will be listed below if you're interested in popping around the video. I do want to thank each of you who has taken the time to comment and like and subscribe to this channel. I'm thrilled that this past week, while I've been putting together this video and making my edits, that my channel Scribbles and Ink Stains hit currently 107 subscribers. So I crossed that threshold that seems so daunting to so many new YouTube creators. I'm now past 100 subscribers, and to celebrate, I'd like to offer a gift card to Goulet Pens. Stick around to the end for details on that giveaway. Back to the video. I think it's important to just make a couple comments on color, especially the color wheel and where one color butts up against another color. Of course, the wheel is a continuum of color shifts. There are inks that really straddle the boundaries between these sections of the color wheel. So I had to make some cuts that you might make a little differently, but as always, you're welcome to let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything that I go over. First of all, this is the system that I was really struggling with before. I still use this traveler's passport size notebook for when I do an unboxing and I just want a quick fountain pen swatch. This is the Midori paper over here on the right, and I typically paste in a little bit of some random scraps of Tomoe River paper that I pulled out of empty pages that didn't get used in prior years' Hobonichi notebooks. I want something a little more like an archive or a catalog that I can refer to. The other system I was starting to use, I was using the summer pages in my work planner. Because I'm a high school English teacher, I do have 2 months where I am sort of a freelancer, unpaid free agent, and I decided to use these pages just to swatch fountain pen inks, and I will probably continue to do so, but I was craving a more general catalog system. And so for that, I chose these two notebooks. Roughly 1 week after posting my Techokagi video, I have already broken the system because I am adding 2 notebooks to my life. Again, the lifespan of these notebooks will be multi-year, and what I decided to do was break this into sections based on the color wheel, and today you'll be able to see on Midori MD notebook paper and Hobonichi Tomoe River paper, you'll be able to see all of my blue inks currently in my collection swatched in with a long-ish first line pulled from a work of literature that I enjoy. All right, let's do it. The rest of the video I'm going to be doing as a voiceover so I can speed along the footage and you're not having to wait for ink to dry. And what you see me doing here is picking out a stamp from a set by Everyday Explorers. It's a little swatch stamp. It's super cute. It's a little bit tiny, which you'll see as I'm filling out the brand names and the color names. I'm going to pre-stamp some of the pages, and that way we are ready to just focus on talking about the characteristics of the ink as I'm swatching. The first ink that I'm going to swatch, you'll see, is my Pilot Iroshizuku Shinkai ink. And this is considered a very wet ink. For me, it's a contender for my Vanishing Point Extra Fine, which has a gold nib, and it's a little bit of a dry writer with the ink that I currently have loaded. On the Midori paper on the right, I would say it's much less intense. It dries down as kind of a subtle steel blue. And on the Hobonichi paper on the left, it remains a little bit brighter, especially in a fountain pen nib. And it also rings more like a bright ultramarine blue than a grayish steel blue. So these inks really do swatch differently depending on the undertones of the paper that you happen to be using. There is a little bit of shading on both of these papers. Shading is where the ink pools in different spots during use and it creates lighter spots and darker spots. You'll be able to see that when I zoom in on the writing samples. This next ink that I'm swatching is again a Pilot Iroshizuku in the shade Tsukiyo. And this one I would say on the Hobonichi paper looks like a pretty true cobalt blue if you're familiar with paints. It's a very wet ink, and one of the reasons I got this sample is one of the reviewers on Goulet pens made a special note that this ink works very well in the Pilot Vanishing Point with the extra fine nib. So I will likely be switching this one into that pen pretty quickly. It is currently loaded with the De Atramentis Archive ink because I wanted a permanent waterproof ink in one of my fountain pens. I feel like I want a wetter ink in that pen. The name Tsukiyo translates to moonlight in Japanese, and on the Midori paper, it almost picks up a greenish teal or turquoise note. I'm going to zoom you in real close and scan both pages. You can always hit pause if you'd like to really deep dive into these inks. So over the next several years, I anticipate purchasing more blues from Pilot Iroshizuku. So I'm going to skip forward a few pages before I start swatching the Robert Oster blues in my collection. The first Robert Oster ink I will swatch is called Tranquility, and it is a turquoise blue. It is very wet, very shading, and absolutely gorgeous in pens. A reviewer on Goulet Pen's website noted that this reminds them a lot of the Emerald of Chabor, but without the shimmer. Now I am swatching the Robert Oster Fire and Ice, which is another turquoisey ink, or in the turquoise family. It is very much more green on the Midori paper and more of a vivid blue on the Hobonichi. It, I feel, is pretty one-dimensional unless you consider the shading, which on this one is really lovely, perhaps not as strong as the shading on the Tranquility. Now we're going to be looking at the Robert Oster Velvet Storm, and this is one of those instances where I have sort of clouded the distinction between blue and green. Officially, Goulet Pens calls this a deep forest green, but I have this loaded in a Pilot Custom 74 with a medium nib. I've been journaling with it extensively on Hobonichi Tomo River paper, and on that paper I see a blue with a green shift. So let me know what you think. I think it's pretty clearly green to my eye on the Midori paper, but I'm curious what you see. Now we are swatching the last of my Robert Oster bottled inks in blue, and this one is called Thunderstorm. It is not as shading as the other Robert Oster blues that I swatched, and it's a little bit slow drying on the Tomo River paper, but also on the Midori paper. So if you're looking for a fast dryer, the Robert Osters are probably perhaps not for you. And it's just that they are so, so wet And their beautiful, beautiful effects really rely on that long time pooling on the paper situation. So I really love this. It's a deep blue-black in my, on the Hobonichi paper, it reads as kind of a blue-gray, and on the Midori, it goes much, much, much darker. In the writing samples, they are both looking closer in color. You don't quite get the blues in the writing sample on the Hobonichi paper. It just looks like a dark, 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 dark blue. This is the Sailor Mano Haha ink, and it is definitely classified as a blue, and it is a marvelous shading ink on the Tomoe River paper. It is a little bit less so on the Midori, but actually now that I'm looking at the swatches where I've really piled on the ink, you definitely get shading on both papers. It's just a different kind of shading. Um, this one is difficult to match with a pen. I would definitely suggest that you would go with a broader nib. For a little while, I had it paired with my Pilot Custom 74, and I did not care for that ink and that pen combination. It just was so faint and low contrast in writing that it did not work for me. But it is absolutely a stunner if you find a broader nib to put it in. These final three blues that I'll be swatching today are all from Organics Studio. They're all three heavily sheening inks. Now, sheen is the process when the ink pools on the paper, a very high shine pigment separates on top. This sheen is very high gloss, but not chunky or micro glittery. Glittery is a different kind of ink property. And you will be able to see on this dip pen on the writing samples what that sheen looks like. Now, all three of these Organic Studio inks are a blue base and they sheen to a red pigment on top. This one, the Ralph Waldo Emerson, is kind of a dark, deep, greeny blue. It's called Twilight Blue by Organic Studio. And I'll be inserting some close-ups on both the Tomoe River paper and the Midori paper. Here's a close-up of Organics Studio Ralph Waldo Emerson on Midori paper. Here is the Organic Studio Ralph Waldo Emerson on Hobonichi paper. Okay, my second sheening ink from Organic Studio is in the color Nitrogen, and this one is more of a, I would say, cobalt turquoisey base color with a sheen that is more leaning purple than the blood red sheen of Ralph Waldo Emerson. The writing sample compared to the Ralph Waldo Emerson seems like a brighter blue that lifts off the page a little bit compared to the deeper, almost blackish read of the Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, if you're using sheening inks, I would love to hear how you're using them. I'm thinking of picking up a Kaweco Sport in the color macchiato with a stub nib or a whatever they have for broad or stub available in that model. So I can use it for lettering, hand lettering, and sort of thinking of using it for headers in my planners and my journals. But I'm curious how you use them if you use sheening inks. I have heard other reviewers suggest that Some of the sheening inks really never do dry down. In other words, you can smudge them years after you've completed the writing. I don't know about that. I'm not noticing that when I try to smudge on my writing samples on the Midori paper. And I'm rubbing pretty vigorously on the Hobonichi paper too, and I'm not seeing any kind of smearing, but perhaps those reviewers are talking about different brands. These two seem pretty rock stable a day after, 2 days after the writing samples. And my final Organic Studios ink is also in a little sample size from Goulet Pen Company. I got their set of sheening inks, and these three were all included. This one is called Santiago Sea Blue, and it is a deep teal blue with a very similar sheen to the other two. Now, I will say that what distinguishes these three to my eye is that this one sheens the most. This, when I lay down the writing and the ink samples, it is all sheen all the time. So even though it has that deep teal base, you see way more of the sheen than you do of the teal in the writing sample. So I thought that was interesting, and that separates it from the other two Organic Studio inks, which I feel like are more equally balanced on those swatches and in the writing. You can always make out the base ink color and the sheen, but in this one, Santiago Sea Blue, it is all sheen all the time. So if you're a fan of sheen, this is the one for you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed this overhaul of my swatch system. Now, it's not perfect. There are things that I would like to do differently. This will work for the next year or so. The one thing I may add to each color section is a fold out longer sheet where I can swatch each of the colors on one sheet so the colors can be compared when it comes time to consider what I want to refill a pen with. That would be useful to me to have that bird's eye view. Let me know if there are any blues that I am missing that are must-haves in your collection. And basically, that's it for today. I want to get to the details for the giveaway. So let's see, here's what you need to do in order to win. Now, again, this is open to US subscribers only. When I grow, if I grow much larger, of course I can open that up to international. This will be for a $20 gift certificate to Goulet Pens. All you need to do to win is between Saturday the 9th, when this video goes live, and Saturday the 16th, subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and drop a comment on any video listing your top 3 stationery slash planner slash fountain pen favorites. It doesn't have to be bougie or high end. It certainly doesn't have to be Hobonichi or a Sailor fountain pen. I just really would love to know what the top 3 items that you grab for, or that you consider your favorite stationery items at this moment in time. Thank you so much for subscribing, for joining me on this little stationery journey, and I will see you in my next video. Ciao.